To understand our world, we must look through the lens of why.
Welcome to Why Lens. In this explainer, we're literally stepping right into the shadows of the human psyche. We're going to look at the actual architecture of human cruelty. I mean, how can perfectly ordinary people be engineered to commit the most unspeakable acts? It's a dark, really unsettling journey, and to be honest, the truth we're uncovering today is going to make you question basically everything you thought you knew about human nature.
Because look, here at Why Lens, we don't scratch the surface, we peel it back. We take these accepted narratives, the textbook psychology you learned in school, and we completely dissect them to find the uncomfortable realities lurking right underneath. And today, we're aiming our lens at literally one of the foundational pillars of modern psychology.
So what if the most famous psychological experiment in history was actually a lie? I want you to reconsider everything you know about the 1971 Stanford Prison Experiment. You probably know the story, right? Dr. Philip Zimbardo takes 24 normal college students, puts them in a basement, flips a coin, and makes half of them guards and half of them prisoners. Within days, the story goes, the guards naturally morph into these sadistic monsters, basically proving that deep down, anyone can become a tyrant. It's a terrifying story. But what if that whole narrative is entirely fabricated? See, for decades, we were all told that the guards naturally turned cruel just by putting on a uniform, just out of nowhere. But thanks to the archival findings of French historian Thibault Letexier, we actually now know the reality is far more disturbing. The researchers didn't just sit back and observe. No, they handed the guards actual rule books. They gave them unwritten scripts. They actively coached these college students on exactly how to psychologically break, humiliate, and completely dehumanize the prisoners. So it wasn't this natural descent into madness at all. Actually, scratch that. It was a highly directed performance.
And man, this just brilliantly illustrates the absolute power of a manufactured narrative. Zimbardo was incredibly media savvy. The experiment didn't end on day 6 simply because things got too real. It ended because the prisoners were revolting, the guards were losing control, and a literal lawyer visited the set, raising massive legal fears about holding students against their will. Plus, we also now know that at least one of the famous emotional breakdowns, it was completely faked by a prisoner who literally just wanted to leave so he could go study for his exams. The whole shebang was deeply, deeply flawed.
Part 1. The Uncomfortable Truth. The Lucifer Effect.
Okay, let's dive into this, because here is the truly mind-bending part of this entire explainer. The Stanford setup might have been a flawed, coached illusion, but the psychological mechanisms it tried to demonstrate, they are absolutely terrifyingly real. So we're going to pivot now to the really uncomfortable truth here. Systemic evil doesn't need a fake basement prison to thrive. It is happening all around us right now. Zimbardo actually coined a term for this, the Lucifer Effect. It's defined as the transformation of ordinary good people into perpetrators of evil under specific situational forces. We all love to imagine this hard concrete wall between good people and bad people. We're over here on the good side, they're over there on the bad side. But as Zimbardo later realized, that line, it's not a wall at all. It's more like a permeable membrane. Depending on the pressures of the environment, human morality can just flow right out, and systemic evil can seep right in. To really grasp how this works, we have to look at this 3-part schema. Whenever a horrific event happens, society almost immediately blames the bad apples, the individuals who committed the act. It's clean, it's easy, and frankly, it lets the rest of us off the hook. But this model demands we look wider. What if those apples were actually placed in a bad barrel, a highly toxic situation or environment that actively corrupted them? And honestly, even more importantly, who exactly are the bad barrel makers? Like, what are the systemic structures, the leadership, and the giant institutions that build these environments in the first place?
Now, if you're sitting there thinking you're completely immune to the barrel, consider this chilling number, 75%. Back in the 1960s, Stanley Milgram conducted his infamous obedience experiments. He told volunteers to administer electric shocks to a person in another room, shocks that eventually reached a lethal voltage. Now, the victim was an actor, and the shocks were totally fake, but the volunteers? They had absolutely no idea. Around 3/4 of the participants just acquiesced. 75% of perfectly normal, everyday people were totally willing to deliver a fatal shock, simply because a guy in a white lab coat told them the experiment required it. No way, right? But it's true.
So, how does that even happen? Well, it happens through these 2 really heavy psychological concepts, de-individuation and the diffusion of responsibility. When you strip away a person's name, give them a uniform, and refer to their victims by numbers or slurs, you trigger this profound psychic numbing. It's wild. You lose your personal identity and, absolutely crucially here, your sense of personal accountability.
You basically start to think, well, it's not me doing this. I'm just playing my part. The system is the one responsible.
And sadly, we've seen this exact thing play out in the darkest corners of our recent history. Just look at this comparison between the Stanford setup and the extremely real-world horrors of the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. The 2004 Schlesinger report actually drew direct, undeniable parallels between the two. In both cases, you had this ambiguous, unwritten script of cruelty. You had distant, equivocal leadership that kind of just looked the other way. You had distant oversight that dumped young, unprepared guards into a total psychological vacuum. Abu Ghraib wasn't just a few bad apples acting up. It was literally a masterclass in bad barrel making.
But hey, before you completely lose all faith in humanity, there is actually another side to this coin. In 2002, psychologists Reicher and Haslam conducted the BBC prison study. But unlike Stanford, they definitely didn't coach their guards to be cruel. And you know what happened? The prisoners actually developed a shared social identity. They bonded, they organized themselves, and by day 6, they completely overthrew the guards' regime. It's a massive point because it proves that when individuals actually forge a collective identity, they don't just automatically surrender to tyranny. They have this immense power to resist it.
Part 2. The Antidote. The Banality of Heroism.
So if the banality of evil means that basically anyone is capable of atrocities under the wrong circumstances, then there's got to be an antidote, right? And there is. Later in his career, Philip Zimbardo actually shifted his entire focus totally away from evil and straight toward this very idea. He realized that the exact same psychological permeability that allows an ordinary person to be corrupted is the exact same permeability that allows an ordinary person to become a hero. If evil is systemic, heroism can absolutely be systemic too.
So the crucial point here is really understanding what true heroism actually is. We tend to get it confused with altruism. Altruism is, volunteering at a local soup kitchen or helping someone cross the street. It's selfless, sure, but there is a very, very low risk to you, the actor. Heroism is entirely different. True heroism requires deep personal sacrifice, physical peril, or profound social cost. It is stepping up and acting in the service of others when you have absolutely everything to lose and literally no expectation of any outside reward. And honestly, there is no better example of this than Joseph Darby. While Abu Ghraib was descending into a complete nightmare of systemic abuse, Darby, who is a military army reservist, found a CD containing graphic photos of the torture. He was just an ordinary guy suddenly placed in a deeply, deeply evil barrel. But instead of diffusing his responsibility like everyone else, he chose to act. He turned those photos in, and for exposing this massive evil, he definitely wasn't immediately paraded around as a hero. His name was leaked, and the backlash was brutal. He was completely villainized by his own hometown. He received violent death threats requiring him to be heavily guarded. Neighbors literally shunned his family, and he spent 3 whole years in protective custody, completely exiled from his community. That is the profound, terrifying social sacrifice of true heroism.
Darby wasn't some comic book superhero. He was just an average, everyday person who decided to step off the bystander track. And this leads us to this incredible concept called the heroic imagination. It's the idea that heroism is actually a habit of the mind. By contemplating these extreme situations in advance, by mentally preparing yourself to face the massive social stigma of, say, blowing the whistle, you actively prime yourself to take action. You literally inoculate yourself against the inaction that allows evil to thrive in the first place. You become a hero in waiting.
So I really want to leave you with this uncomfortable, kind of mind-bending question. Where is your tipping point? If you were suddenly placed in the basement at Stanford, or working the night shift at Abu Ghraib, or sitting at a dial connected to a giant shock generator, what would you actually do? Are you a bad apple, or are you just waiting to be dropped into the wrong barrel? It's a decision you have to make every single day, right inside your own mind.
Thank you so much for exploring the dark, highly complex mechanics of the human mind with us today. If you want to keep cultivating that heroic imagination and keep uncovering the truth behind the narratives we're fed every day, hit that subscribe button to join us here at Y-Lens. We are going to keep peeling back the surface. Stay focused, stay questioning, and we'll see you in the next
Why settle for shallow facts? Join the intellectual rebellion. Subscribe to Y-Lens now.